Hi everyone, welcome to the 2021 NEAS Management Conference. My name is Di Price and I've had the pleasure of knowing NEAS since 1997. I wanted to share with you my memories of NEAS and the journey that NEAS has been on over the last 31 years. NEAS was founded in May 1990 and is celebrating its 31st birthday at this year's conference. I was first introduced to NEAS in 1997 when Maggie Gray and Anna Saul came to the ELT Centre where I was the academic manager to conduct a full accreditation inspection. I was very nervous at the time, but impressed at how friendly and helpful both Maggie and Anna were. In May, I went to the first National NEAS Director of Studies Management Conference, the role of the DOS, how do we get it right, at the Manly Pacific Park Royal Hotel on the Corso, and remembered how I felt as a new academic manager, not knowing anyone in the industry. I joined NEAS 2 years later in the office at 231 Miller Street. Glenys Merrifield was National Manager and a great source of knowledge about ELICOS in Australia, and always happy to provide advice and clarification about various aspects of the industry. After several moves with the NEAS office in and around Miller and Berry Street in North Sydney, I was still there 20 years later. Stefan Boffer was working at NEAS, having begun in January that year as the AMEP project officer. Maggie Gray worked part-time and was a font of knowledge and brilliant at analysing any ELT centre's financial information. And Mary Ann van der Wietering was the administration manager who organised the routine monitoring visits and knew the names of all the principal administrators and academic managers at each of the 100 ELT centres throughout Australia. At that time, the details for each individual ELT centre were recorded on separate cards in a small box which lived on top of one of the cupboards, and any changes were done by hand. Individual files for each centre were kept in filing cabinets. 2000. At that time, NEAS granted provisional accreditation for the first 12 months if the initial application and visit complied with the NEAS standards and criteria. A full accreditation visit followed, usually 12 months later, and the ELT Centre could then use the NEAS logo on its promotional material. In the office, I assessed various annual returns, which included hard copies of promotional material and kilos of paper documents. I also assessed new courses, and we were required to notify VTAB in New South Wales or the relevant state registering authority of a new course, premises or other changes. And we had a good working relationship with relevant key personnel in all the relevant state departments. Glenys Merrifield as General Manager was incredibly multi-skilled, caring and efficient, as well as being able to maintain a sense of humour. And we would break for a cup of tea each morning around 10:30 and review any areas that were required. In 2000, the 10th anniversary of the founding of the National ELICOS Accreditation Scheme, the conference was held at the Millennium Hotel in Sydney, entitled The Director of Studies, Effective Leader, Efficient Manager. At that time, the conference committee included a working party on the future of the DOS conference, which included Jan Collins, previously with GEOS, who later came to work at NEAS. That year, on the 12th of April 2000, just before the conference, the ELICOS Association launched a new company, English Australia Pty Limited, and started promoting the name English Australia. Around that time, the exposure draft of the National Code was published online, and NEAS wrote to DECHA expressing concerns about sources of possible conflict between the National Code and the NEAS standards and criteria for accreditation. At the beginning of 2001, the much admired, well-respected and indomitable Maggie Gray decided to retire. She was and always will be a source of knowledge and inspiration to all who work in the ELICOS industry. NEAS had a team of NEAS assessment panellists, we called them NAPs, in each state, and NEAS organised the on-site visits, the premises, candidacy and full accreditation, as well as routine monitoring visits from the Sydney office. When any on-site visits were undertaken, the premises naturally were included in the inspection. One NAP was known for her diligence with a tape measure and another with her focus on electrical safety and safe wiring, etc. I remember organising monitoring visits for one of our NAPs to an established provider in Perth, and the documents NEAS provided inadvertently had the wrong website address, which turned out to be a porn site, and received a rather perplexed call from the NAP who was to undertake the visit the following morning. In June 2001, the National Code of Practice came into effect, and NEAS also developed a new course checklist with the intention of making the task of course and curriculum design easier to follow. The AMEP manual was also reviewed and available for providers. In 2002, the 6th National DOS Management Conference, the business of education, managing the balance in education was the focus. The term DOS was still used in all sessions. Participants were around 130, and for the first time, the conference evaluation form was attached to the program booklet. 2002 was also the first year that AMEP managers were invited to attend the NEAS DOS conference. Requirements introduced by the ESOS Act 2000, ESOS Regulations 2001 and the National Code of Practice were now in place. And generally, providers had the most problems coming to terms with refund policies, grievance procedures and use of student information. DEST, along with NEAS, also placed a limit of 20% of total tuition time on work placement. The first seminar for principal administrators was held in Brisbane early in 2002, and the venue was provided by Language Studies International, with over 40 attending. That year, Anna Saul and I shared the position of assistant manager, and Stefan Boffa remained the AMEP project officer. There were now 170 accredited ELICOS institutions and 19 branches on the NEAS database. In addition, there was a renewed interest in setting up ELT centres as well as extending existing businesses. 8 applications for candidacy and 14 applications for accreditation were being processed at that time. Also in 2002, Anna Bratkovic, later the General Manager of NEAS, joined the team. Around this time, many ELT centres in New South Wales had to start compiling their 5-yearly reapproval application for re-registration on CRICOS. This application was largely in the form of a self-assessment with relevant documents attached. NEAS also commissioned a research project to look at the delivery of self-access in accredited ELICOS centres with the intention of developing a guide to good practice in this area. And Maggie Gray and Kath Brandon were engaged to conduct the research. 2003 was an interesting and challenging year for NEAS, with ACPET expressing interest in having much greater control of the private ELT education sector. In November, ACPET requested a place on the NEAS board, although this was rejected by both EA and NEAS at the time. Susanna Clerk joined the NEAS staff in July 2003, having worked at International House in Cairns, China and Brisbane. NEAS were again successful this year, largely due to Stefan Boffa, in winning a contract to provide quality assurance of AMEP service delivery until 2008. Gary O'Toole joined NEAS in May 2004, having worked at ACL in both the Migrant English and ELICOS programs, as well as working in higher education in teaching, administrative and managerial roles. I remember going with Gary, an Adimia desk representative who always arrived on his motorbike, to an ELT centre in the Sydney CBD to follow up concerns around student attendance monitoring. Apparently all the female students in question were busy working all night and slept in class during the day, so it was course progress that was the issue. New applications for NEAS accreditation were regularly submitted. At one stage, Glenys had 3 applications from different providers waiting to be assessed. The only problem was each of these applications specified the same person as the nominated Director of Studies. 2005 was a tumultuous time for NEAS, and around that time a new constitution came into effect, which stipulated that members of NEAS were to elect the board, which would also include a representative from English Australia. At that time, ACPET was calling for a review of the NEAS standards and the re-registration of NEAS providers. In 2006, Terry Austin was chair of the NEAS board and Professor Gordon Stanley was also on the board. Concerns about the government taking over the NEAS standards and criteria took up a lot of time, particularly for Anne Newman, the national manager at that time. There were also real issues around the area of NEAS intellectual property in regard to this material. At that time, the NEAS conference moved to the Swiss Hotel in Market Street, Sydney. The 10th conference was titled The DOS in 2006, Just Keeping Up or A Step Ahead. This was the first year Anna Bratkovic convened the conference, and she undertook this role until 2011. That same year, Jeffrey Cruz at IALF in Jakarta and Louise Fitzgerald at ACE in Phnom Penh achieved NEAS accreditation for their ELT centres as NEAS's first overseas members. Professor Gordon Stanley was chair of the NEAS board in 2007. In 2008, NEAS had a new chair of the board, Emeritus Professor Millicent Poole. At that time, the emerging Saudi market presented the ELT centres with both benefits and challenges. There were a range of issues for the new DOS to understand, and change management and global connection were areas to be considered. Stefan Boffer continued overseeing the AMEP, and I visited AMEP centres in Hobart and regional Tasmania, as well as a number of centres in Melbourne, all providing a range of relevant programs for their clients. In 2009, NEAS undertook initial and re-registration on-site visits for ACPET, now ITECA, for ELT providers wanting to include ELT courses on CRICOS. Self-access resources were often an issue in the early days when computer labs were not as common and there was access to only a limited number of websites. However, it was a surprise to see one new provider, when asked about resources, taking the NAP outside to his car and opening the boot to proudly show them the books he had purchased. However, at that time, most ELT centres, large and small, provided excellent and thoughtfully designed facilities, care and support. That year, Jan Collins, previously with GEOS, joined NEAS and worked part-time for 5 years till 2014. Towards the end of 2009, Anna Bratkovic and I went to Perth to conduct individual routine monitoring visits and also present a NAPS workshop on monitoring visits. Midway through the meeting, we received a very alarming phone call from Anne Newman, General Manager of NEAS at the time, to say that she had just had a call from the chair of the NEAS board to advise her that she was no longer required. We were both understandably dismayed and alarmed. In 2010, Anne Holmes was appointed National Manager, and we moved literally down the road to the corner of Miller and Berry Street, level 3, as the current building was being pulled down and replaced by a block of units. The new premises were large. We each had a separate office and a phone. Another spacious area was to be used for information sessions for academic managers and PAs, as well as other functions, and there was a well-appointed boardroom which we also used for smaller staff meetings on a regular basis. There was also space for the large compactus, which held all the NEAS box files of provider documents such as annual returns and course applications. For many years, the CAM TESOL conference in Phnom Penh was a regular event for NEAS, and I remember being so impressed with the professional and very calm approach of Paul Marnie, who was responsible for the organisation of this event, which had over 400 delegates. NEAS regularly supported the conference and delivered an annual seminar for academic managers across the region. And Marion Baggett from NEAS was a regular member of the organising committee. NEAS continued to be responsible for monitoring the AMEP and took on the additional role of managing the AMEP Assessment Task Bank under the leadership of Anna Bratkovic. Marion Baggett joined the NEAS staff in 2012 as an assessment officer, and with her knowledge of ELT played an important role in the development of the subsequent quality assurance framework. NEAS will always be indebted to Marion for the series of very clear guidelines and documents which she has written in relation to the quality review process, which was later introduced in 2017. The NAPs, many of whom still worked in the ELT industry, were the face of NEAS and always took their roles very seriously. And we were careful to avoid any conflicts of interest when we organised individual visits. In 2012, Denise Taylor joined the board of NEAS and was later appointed to the role of chair. Denise served on the board until 2020, and her stewardship of NEAS for these 8 years of incredible change made an important impact on the health of NEAS and the capability of the board. In April 2013, Peter Sterling Benson was appointed interim CEO of NEAS. There was a shift in focus from registration and regulation to quality assurance to provide ELT centres with a distinct advantage in the ELT marketplace. Mark Raven, with experience in the vet sector, was appointed CEO of NEAS in September. Margaret Kinvig joined the staff and became mainly responsible for the AMEP. That year, Jan Collins and I accompanied 2 DIMIA representatives to a meeting at an ELT centre to follow up on a range of issues, and incidentally were regaled with a number of interesting stories about visa scams and questionable living arrangements. That year, Jan's dog Luke joined us after having had an operation to remove his spleen. The Quality Learning Series was launched in 2013 and so is now in its 8th year. NEAS has continued to offer professional development to the sector since. 2014 was a busy year. Professionally for NEAS, it was the year that NEAS rolled out the NEAS Quality Assurance Framework under the direction of Mark Raven. Quality review visits based on the QA framework, areas A to E, were piloted. Also at that time, both ASQA and TEXA were becoming more involved with ELICOS. The QA framework was introduced at the NEAS conference, which was held at Walsh Bay, where we are today. Anna Bratkovic was appointed General Manager and Lauren Ahern joined NEAS as an Assessment Officer. That year, the first Quality Learning Series was rolled out, with 5 different seminars repeated around the country. The NEAS Premium Product category was also introduced the same year, with the first Premium Product endorsements being awarded to ICT UQ, and the University of Western Australia's Centre for English Language Teaching. 2014 also saw the establishment of the NEAS Advisory Council, with representatives from a number of key member centres around Australia. Dr. Patrick Pheasant, the chair of the Advisory Council at that time, is still with NEAS as CEO today. 2015, the biennial quality review visit process was rolled out across Australia, with a view to 50% of NEAS member centres being visited each year. NEAS assessors emphasise their role as friends, and the support that the new process provided to centres was well received. That year, NEAS moved to smaller and less costly premises on level 2 of the same building with an open plan office. A compactus was still being used to store ELT Centre files in numerous individual boxes, with a smaller storeroom with photocopier and filing cabinets, which also served as an ironing room for the CEO and as his changing room for his regular lunchtime run. In 2015, NEAS initiated the creation of Quaylen, an international consortium of quality assurance agencies from Australia, New Zealand, Malta, Canada, United Kingdom, America and South Africa. This group has met regularly since and established regular benchmarking activities to ensure NEAS quality assurance standards are internationally benchmarked. Also in this year, there was the first agreement and recognition of the relationship between NEAS and ASQA, thanks to the insight and forward thinking of Michael Lavache, the then current Commissioner. In October of 2016, Dr. Patrick Pheasant was appointed as CEO of NEAS, bringing with him a wealth of experience as the Director of the Centre of English Teaching at the University of Sydney and as Chair of the NEAS Advisory Council. Patrick has also brought impressive enthusiasm, energy and kindness to NEAS and those who work here. In December, Patrick signed an MOU between TEXA and NEAS. In 2017, NEAS again relocated on Miller Street, further up the road. The filing cabinets and compactus were gone and all NEAS operations were now carried out electronically. Patrick presented a session on excellence in delivery for principal administrators at Bentley's in the city. And for the first time, it was acknowledged that this group of key personnel had specific skills and needs to be considered. Nicola Gray joined this NEAS staff and conducted quality review visits, as well as frequently conducting stretching and yoga workouts for the staff. Ben Colthorpe and Cameron Heath joined the NEAS staff that year and continued to be very patient with my lack of IT skills. The Quality Learning Series had gone from strength to strength, and NEAS Online was launched in August 2017 and has since attracted over 500 participants. In 2018, a panel of experienced ELT professionals was initiated into the new process for the Quality Review Visits, QRVs, in Australia. Extensive quality review visits were undertaken with member centres in Vietnam, Cambodia, Indonesia, Singapore and Dubai. And it wasn't unusual for Ben or Anna to be out of the country conducting them. Anna Bratkovic developed a very positive working relationship with key personnel at ASQA and has been responsible for conducting a number of audits in collaboration with ASQA officers. It was largely thanks to Anna that ASQA now recognises the skills and knowledge that NEAS has to offer. In September, Ben Colthorpe was appointed Operations Manager, in charge of quality review visits and conducts regular Zoom meetings with the NAPS and oversees the QLS. Cameron Heath was appointed Member Services Officer, looking after the conference and the website, and both are instrumental in building relations with ELT centres and in maintaining the NEAS office as a great place to work. 2019. The last NEAS conference before COVID hit us all was a huge success. And again, we could justifiably say this year was the best ever. Cameron continued working on a number of new and exciting areas for the doomed 2020 conference, and Marion continued to write useful, clear and impressive documents which are really appreciated by all the NAPs and others who read them. Finally, a warm welcome to Joel and Jackie, who later joined the team, and I hope that they have as much fun as we have all had at NEAS under the innovative and caring leadership of Patrick. 2020, NEAS continued to support the ELT industry with a series of online courses for ELT staff and providers. In addition, a comprehensive document was written by the CEO, Dr. Patrick Pheasant, titled Respond, Revive and Thrive Plan, which details focused, realistic and innovative ways in which NEAS will continue to support quality delivery of innovative ELT programs and services at a range of ELT providers, large and small, both in Australia and overseas. Tanya Buchanan was appointed Chair of the Board in 2020, and together with Patrick and with support of the Board, the Advisory Council and the staff, NEAS is certainly placed to continue serving the English language teaching industry in Australia and our neighbouring countries.